Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Miriam Corowa. The standoff at an Aboriginal campsite on Heirisson Island in Western Australia is over, at least for now. Police made several arrests last Thursday as they moved in on the Aboriginal activists who've been camping on the island for weeks.
Police have already tried to remove campers from Heirisson Island twice. They're hoping this time it's for good. For weeks, the island has been home to dozens of Aboriginal activists angry about a proposed native title deal.
This is our sanctuary, where you have no jurisdiction whatsoever.
After police in the city of Perth spent the week arguing over who had the power to remove the activists, it came to a standoff between police and the protesters, as officers enforced a council bylaw preventing camping on the island.
Doesn't matter, that doesn't matter if you push it out, we'll still get back.
The campers put up a brief fight, but the weight of police numbers soon had them on the run. The protesters have now moved away, and City of Perth staff under police guard will be cleaning up what's left of the tent embassy throughout most of the afternoon. The protesters say they'll be back. The police say they'll be ready.
Hunting native animals has of course been a part of Aboriginal culture for a very long time, but modern values towards animal welfare are now bringing the practice into question. An inquiry is now underway in Queensland amid calls by activists for a crackdown on Indigenous hunting of species at risk. But will the furor result in real action to stop the cruelty and the illegal trade in turtle and dugong meat? Sarah Dingle has this story and a warning: some viewers may be distressed by images in this story.
From Australia's far north, more images of cruelty. A distressed turtle tethered on shore, allegedly left there for a week.
So it's been there since the weekend? Yeah. Do you know when they're going to eat it?
This turtle was filmed by animal rights activist Rupert Imhoff on Boigu Island in the Torres Strait.
This poor turtle was left blistering in the sun. Its skin was blistering, it was completely dehydrated, and it was probably going to die a slow, agonising death over the next few days.
In Queensland, native title hunting is exempt from animal welfare provisions. Ahead of the inquiry's findings, the state's Environment Minister has already said she won't outlaw the cruelty in these images.
To hunt is allowable under the Native Title Act. To not recognise that in our animal care and protection laws could actually open up the ability for people to, attack the traditional owners' right to hunt.
Barrister Geoff Beveridge is campaigning to close the loophole in Queensland's animal cruelty laws.
I think that interpretation is wrong, sadly wrong, from the point of view that the Act, the Queensland Welfare Act, allows them to make regulations. And if those regulations control Indigenous hunting, or the methods of Indigenous hunting, that sits comfortably with the Native Title Act.
I think people get a different concept of traditional hunting and traditional foods.
A handful of traditional owner groups have self-imposed limits or moratoriums on the hunting of turtle and dugong. Some, like Seith Fourmile from Cairns, are working with the RSPCA to promote humane killing practices.
The turtle should be under a shade and in the shade and stuff before you go to kill them.
I think pretty well everyone agrees that what we've seen couldn't be seen as best practice.
Late last year, Federal Environment Minister Tony Burke pledged $5 million to help traditional owners sustainably manage turtle and dugong hunting. Tony Burke insists this will deliver results.
You can say that you've ticked the box, you can say, well, this is what the law says, but if it's not making a difference on the ground, then you really have to wonder whether we're trying for a political fix or actually to make a difference in animal welfare and sustainability issues.
Animal welfare activists say there's also an urgent need to investigate the illegal sale of turtle and dugong meat. Cape York elders want to end the esky trade.
There's large evidence that, there is an engagement in the black market sale of turtle and dugong meat.
But the federal government says no such trade exists.
I've put to my compliance issues that they're questions that should be asked, they're questions that they're pursuing, but at this stage their information back to me is they don't have the information that specific laws have been broken.
Australian Customs has told 7:30 it's the Queensland Environment Department's responsibility to investigate, and that department says the job is Customs. The federal opposition says more rangers on patrol is the answer.
We'll be pledging $1.6 million over 3 years. That will be the equivalent of up to 20 years of individual rangers working in the field.
In our previous investigation, at least one esky was addressed to a ranger. The Torres Strait Regional Authority says the rangers, as traditional owners, have the right to harvest turtle and dugong and share the meat and eggs with their families on the mainland.
We need to make sure that there are genuine rangers, that there is an oversight of those rangers, an oversight of the whole program, and the best thing to do would be for the Crime and Misconduct Commission to look at what has clearly been a widespread practice of poaching.
Every single new piece of evidence will be investigated by my government because we do not condone the illegal trade, we do not condone the poaching, and that's why there's an investigation underway right now.
State and federal governments admit they have no numbers of how many turtles, dugongs and turtle eggs are taken under native title hunting, and there's no report date for the Queensland Government inquiry.
It's taken 10 years, but traditional owners now have exclusive native title rights over the town of Mataranka in the Northern Territory. The federal court held a special sitting there to mark the occasion, and traditional owners say they've now got more control over the future direction of the town. Miles Morgan was at the ceremony.
Elders in Mataranka were celebrating a historic event. They'd just been given formal recognition of something they'd known all along.
Well, it changed my life for my grandchildren and my children, and they have that responsibility for this country.
Representatives of the federal court say the wait to settle the claim was too long, but an amicable agreement has been reached.
We are thankfully getting closer to an environment in which cooperation, goodwill and reasonable accommodations are replacing distrust, hostility and onerous requirements of proof.
The Ngajig and Goyangang Nunavut elders say it isn't so much a victory for them as it is for their children.
I'm happy about our culture, so that's got to go back to our younger generation. They grow up and they carry on, and they'll know the hunting and underground fishing and cultural.
Traditional owners say they'll also have more influence in the day-to-day running of the town and more control over possible future resources projects. The Northern Territory government says the way forward for Mataranka is now firmly in the hands of the elders.
They can now go on and look to a very bright future. Issues such as land release and issues such as services like childcare services can now be discussed and a way forward may be reached.
This is only the third town in the Northern Territory to be given native title recognition by consent. It's taken a decade to reach this decision, but the Territory government says it wants to see similar claims settled with the same relative ease.
But certainly there's been cases that have taken longer, but what it does show and demonstrate to the people of the Territory and Australia that by sitting down with traditional owners, with the land councils, they can be resolved fairly quickly.
Elders say they've now set a precedent, so traditional owners elsewhere could also make claims on other Territory towns.
Northern Territory pubs say they're sick of being unfairly targeted under the federal government's new intervention laws. The government wants the power to nominate venues for investigation if it suspects they're causing harm to Aboriginal people. But the Australian Hotels Association says pubs shouldn't have to be responsible for problem drinkers.
The federal government wants to continue many of the intervention measures introduced into Aboriginal communities in 2007. Under updated laws, it now wants to be able to nominate hotels to be investigated if it suspects they're contributing to chronic alcohol abuse. But the AHA says pubs aren't the problem.
The Federal Minister is trying to make licensees the scapegoat for the chronic alcohol abuse problem in the Territory.
The Indigenous Affairs Minister says some pubs and bottle shops are harming Aboriginal people through their serving practices. But the industry says it can't be held accountable for drinking that takes place outside of licensed venues.
And the Federal Minister is proposing to cast a dark cloud over licensees' businesses on something they can't possibly control.
The Northern Territory opposition says the new legislation will give the Commonwealth even more power over the territory.
We don't need the heavy-handed, clumsy approach of the Commonwealth overriding the Northern Territory.
But the Territory government is supporting the move. It says it won't lose any of its own powers to refer venues to the Licensing Commission.
It would be a Territory government minister's decision whether or not to appoint assessors.
The Hotels Association says it isn't critical of all government policy tackling alcohol abuse. It's hailed the Territory government's banned drinkers register as a success.
Two passions rule the remote Tiwi Islands in the top end: football and art. And every year the Tiwis open their home to hundreds of visitors from the mainland for their local grand final match and art fair.
By air and by sea, footy fans arrived at the Aboriginal community of Niuyu for the Tiwi Islands' biggest day of the year.
We've been picking up a bit from a few of the locals, so I think buffaloes is the way to go.
On Bathurst Island, 80 kilometres north of Darwin, is a grand final day like no other.
Everyone's really excited and riled up about the games.
There's bargain hunting to be had at art centres where the Tiwi's unique designs on fabric, pottery and canvas are on sale.
To come to the island to watch great grand footy and enjoy the art and the people as well.
Aside from art, there's one main pastime that unites young and old on the islands.
It's a very passionate football for us, and that is our second religion, and we love to see football.
This year's grand final is a battle between two teams from across the divide. The reigning premiers, the Imaloo Tigers from Melville Island, against the 2U Buffaloes from here on Bathurst.
The Buffaloes used their home ground advantage to take the lead early and didn't give it up for the remainder of the game despite a late charge from the Tigers in the final quarter. In the end, it was 2U by 2 goals. And there was another reason to celebrate on the islands. The Tiwi Bombers' first Northern Territory Football League Premiership Cup is now home.
And that's all for this edition of the program. Don't forget you can get all the Indigenous news in one place at abc.net.au/Indigenous. And I'll see you again for Weekend Breakfast on Saturday morning.